I'm going to be honest here. I want my channel to be much more than just commenting on the insanity that comes out of the trans community. Seriously, I have some videos planned covering different political subjects in the future, but these keep getting interrupted, and until gender radicals decide to take it easy, I guess it's my solemn duty to call out their bullshit. So what's the story this week? Seriously, a few years ago, you'd be lucky to read a trans story once a month, but now it feels like it's almost every day. I decided rather than focus on one particular story, I would find 3 most ridiculous and worrying trans-related stories I could find. Think of it as a This Week in Stupid Trans News, but without the chance of a certain someone killing it off unintentionally, Mark. So let's start off with what's probably the strangest story of the week. Trans woman files human rights complaints against 16 women for refusing to wax their genitals. No, I'm not making this up. Apparently, there's a trans woman in Canada who is demanding beauticians wax her testicles, and when they refuse, probably because that's not a service they offer, she then raises human rights complaints and demands compensation in order to drop them. According to the Daily Wire, 16 Canadian women have had human rights complaints filed against them by a male to female transgender individual for alleged gender identity discrimination. John Carpe, a lawyer and the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, is representing 2 of the women who are being targeted by the complainant, who is referred to only as JY. In accordance with an order from the BC Human Rights Tribunal, the transgender individual must be kept anonymous. I need to point out this is probably a different trans woman to the one who, just a few months ago, filed a complaint against a Muslim beautician for refusing the same service, which created a clusterfuck for woke progressives everywhere as to who they should be supporting. So it appears Canada is now in the grip of an epidemic where trans women want their balls waxed and will raise discrimination complaints when that service is denied. In recent months, JY approached 16 Vancouver area female beauticians who only serve women, requesting a Brazilian bikini wax in the groin area, in spite of the fact that JY is able to obtain a manzillion in Vancouver. So it turns out having testicles waxed has its own name. I'll be honest, I wasn't aware of that. Not that I would ever need to know, of course. Maybe it's because pre-op, I was fairly nervous about anyone seeing my genitals. Hell, I wasn't even comfortable showing them to medical professionals. But to demand women you don't know wax them makes me wonder just whether you have any sort of dysphoria surrounding them at all. What makes this story concerning, however, is the lack of help the women involved have found. John Carfe explained to the Daily Wire, fighting the complaint through to a hearing can cost an aesthetician upwards of $20,000, and one of the women represented by the Justice Centre had approached and been turned down by 26 different lawyers and law firms, all of which cited lack of expertise in human rights proceedings or fear of offending the transgender lobby, or both. This shows the power the trans lobby currently has, despite their claims of being the most oppressed people on the planet. When even legal firms are scared of them, this speaks volumes. Now this is clearly an example of someone wanting easy money, finding people who are naturally going to turn down their request, then bring legal action against them when it happens. I understand there's probably going to be some trans women out there who may be more comfortable with having testicles waxed than I ever would have been, but I'd like to think they would be self-aware enough to understand not everyone wants to see them, and they're specifically asking for a Brazilian, which is for the labia, not the balls. And this procedure doesn't stay the same when changing your gender because, and I shouldn't have to say this, testicles and labias are different, and I'd assume they would need different approaches to complete. But is this a case of discrimination? I'm not going to say I'm an expert in discrimination laws, particularly ones that apply to Canada, but I don't really think so. What this person is asking the beauticians to provide is simply a service they don't seem to offer. You should not be able to compel someone to do something that not only are they not comfortable with, but it's something they don't even offer. As strange as all this is, there's certainly worrying undertones, and anyone who values freedom should stand against this selfish idiot. So can we top this? Well, perhaps. How about a transgender Powells employee says the bookstore refused to designate a gender-neutral restroom in its corporate office? Yep. For Z Brewer, nice NB name there, Powell's Books was a literary utopia. So when an accounting job opened in July at the Portland bookseller's corporate office, Brewer jumped in. According to an LGBT rights organisation in Oregon, where the bookseller is based, Powell's has been a long supporter of the LGBT community. So you'd think there would be a match made in heaven.
What could possibly go wrong?
But in August, Brewer filed a complaint against Powells with the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and in October they filed a second complaint with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries, so they've not even been there that long and they're already raising complaints. So what was the crimes committed by Powells? Well, I gave the first one away already. Powells has heartlessly discriminated against Z for refusing to provide a gender-neutral bathroom in their head office. See, Powells only has 2 bathrooms, and Z, who is biologically male but doesn't want to use either of those options, would have to make the humiliating walk to a public gender-neutral restroom instead. Z kicked up a huge fuss, so Powells eventually added a gender-neutral bathroom just for Z 3 months after they joined. There's no word on if they fitted a whole new bathroom just for one person or changed one of the current bathrooms to also include Z. And let's face it, if they went with the latter, they're just going to make the women's into gender neutral because that's what they always do. But that's not the end of Z's dilemma. Far from it. When Brewer arrived at Powells in July, they sensed their new co-workers in accounting were uncomfortable with the pronouns they, them and their, and even having Brewer around. People were so afraid to misgender me that they would avoid talking to me altogether. Look, I'm sure that's not the case because Z clearly went for an androgynous look to make it easier to refer to them as them. Right, guys? Right? Yeah, Z is biologically male, looks biologically male, but gets upset if you don't force yourself to use a pronoun that doesn't reflect what you're looking at. I'm happy to use preferred pronouns, that's why I'm referring to Z as they, but a part of transitioning is to show others who you are as part of a social contract. If you're not going to change yourself, don't get upset if people don't instinctively realise you're actually a they. So what else happened? Well, in August, Brewer's accounting colleagues held a ladies' lunch at a Mexican restaurant. All 9 of Brewer's co-workers in the department are women. Only Brewer wasn't invited. Instead, Brewer says, they were asked to stay behind to answer phones. Being a department of only females, a ladies' lunch met everyone but me, Brewer says. I like Mexican food. I like margaritas. I would have loved to have been a part of the team. Wait, you're complaining about women gathering together and excluding other genders? That's not very progressive of you, is it, Z? But seriously, this is quite an inventive way of excluding an annoying colleague. We're talking about someone who raised a stink about not having their own special bathroom pre-installed for them when they joined. Then also complains when they aren't referred to as they, despite looking like a man and being biologically male. Not everyone is on board with the latest wokest trends in social justice. In fact, I'd say it's only a minority that's indoctrinated into it. You can't expect everyone to preemptively fall in line. Transitioning involves compromises on both sides, but I suppose based on the way Z looks, that's not exactly what they're going for. To give them credit, there is one thing Powells did that may be messed up. In July, Z sent a doctor's note to the HR department. Its letterhead included the word infectious diseases in the doctor's title. 10 days later, Brewer says, Powell's HR demanded to see proof of their HIV status, a violation of federal workplace laws. It wouldn't surprise me if that was indeed breaking the law, as that's highly personal information which has little to do with the day job. I think this is more of a story than a bathroom not being fitted in time and women going out for margaritas, but it doesn't fit in with the victim narrative quite as well. The last story I'm going to be looking at is a common sight from universities in the Western world concerning a favoured tactic by the left when it comes to views they find uncomfortable: deplatforming. And the victim this week? Women's Hour host Jenny Murray. According to Pink News, Murray is pulled out of a talk at Oxford University for personal reasons after students accused her of being transphobic. Murray had been due to speak at an Oxford University History Society event on the 10th of November, which is on powerful British women in history. But in a Facebook post, it was announced Murray would no longer be speaking. This is after a group run by Oxford University Students' Union signed an open letter calling on their institute to publicly condemn Murray and cancel the event. Oxford SU LGBTQ+ campaign believed that inviting publicly transphobic speakers to the university without challenge further marginalises and unnecessarily compromises the welfare of trans students and staff, the letter read. The activists were also upset that the event on British women in history wasn't framed as a way to respond to an article written more than a year earlier on trans women. So they're talking about two very different things there. So what did Murray say that was so horrific? The activists claim this comes from an article written by Murray for the Sunday Times back in March 2017 called "Be Trans, Be Proud, but Don't Call Yourself a Real Woman." Sounds awful, right? Let's jump in and see what she said. Let me make something absolutely clear at the outset. I am not transphobic or anti-trans, not a TERF in other words. That's trans-exclusionary radical feminist, to use one of the often confusing expressions that have entered the language in this age of gender revolution. Sounds like TERF talk to me. I can't agree with Julie Birchall or Germaine Greer, whose language in their expression of revulsion at a trans woman, a man who becomes a woman, claiming to be a real woman, has been unacceptably crude. Why demean yourself and the feminist politics to which you devoted your life by saying, cruelly and distastefully, just because you lop off your penis, it doesn't make you a woman, or referring to transgender females as screaming mimmies and bedwetters in bad wigs? No, I'm not going to make a joke here. This is a sensible comment to make, and it's one I'm glad that she said. She then goes on to condemn the radical attitudes of modern trans activists. So I'm really warming to her here. When do we get to the nasty stuff? To cut to the chase, Murray discusses two trans women, Carol Stone, a reverend who transitioned back in 2000, and media personality India Willoughby, who both refer to themselves as real women despite living significant portions of their lives as men, both in society and biologically. Murray disputes they are real women because of their differences to those who are biologically female, but she doesn't call them men and still uses female pronouns to refer to them. She also received flack for using phrases like transsexual and transvestite. Look, as a transsexual myself, I'm sick of these outlets deciding what is an out-of-date phrase, but disagreeing with the narrative is what got her into the firing line. By highlighting these differences, she's therefore calling trans women men, according to the activists, which isn't what she's doing. I recommend everyone read it and come to their own conclusions. I'll post a link to it in the description. Murray may be critical of some things within the trans movement, but that's exactly her right to be. And what's more, she's certainly more balanced than some of the more hardline gender critical activists out there. If even Murray is being sidelined for her opinions, it's showing the true power of the trans narrative on our campuses. For the sake of freedom of speech, this needs to be stopped. So what are your thoughts on these stories? And have I missed out anything particularly crazy? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Videos are going to be in more of this format for the foreseeable future, as I'm going to be having surgery at the end of January. So there's going to be a little bit of a face reveal in the new year. But make sure to catch me on Twitter, and I'll see you all next time.